students. Now we are on the fifth lecture on nervous system in series of general anatomy. Okay, and in this last lecture we will learn specifically about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. In the last lecture, we have learned the basic aspect of the autonomic nervous system, and here in this lecture, we will specifically learn about the characters of the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Okay, so I'm moving to the next slide. Now, first we will deal with about the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. Okay. Now, as far as sympathetic division is concerned, this division is also called as thoracolumbar outflow. This division is also called as thoracolumbar outflow. Why this division is called as the thoracolumbar outflow? Now, because here the preganglionic nerve cells are located between thoracic 1 to the lumbar 2 segments of the spinal cord, that I have told you in the previous lecture also, that these are the preganglionic neurons which are located in the spinal cord. Okay, that means they are located in the central nervous system from thoracic 1 to L2 spinal segment. Okay, now this preganglionic, which is also known as presynaptic, and I told you that why it is called presynaptic, because this preganglionic neuron will send their axon which will synapse with the postganglionic neuron. Okay, so because this neuron is located before the synapse between the pre and post ganglionic neuron, that's why this neuron is called as preganglionic or presynaptic neuron. Okay, and these neuron, as you already know, they are located in the lateral horn of the gray column, okay, of the spinal cord. There was a anterior horn, then was a posterior horn of the gray column in a transverse section you have seen, and between the T1 and L2 there is presence of a small projection on the side which is called as the gray column. Okay, right. Then the postganglionic or postsynaptic neurons are located in two groups. This is important to note, okay, because I have not told you about these. Okay, these are located in two groups. That is, first group is paravertebral sympathetic chain. Okay, paravertebral group means it is these neurons, postganglionic or postsynaptic, I have told you they are located in sympathetic chain where it is having many ganglion. Okay, and what was the ganglion? A collection of the nerve cell outside the brain and spinal cord. So it is in sympathetic chain. So these are the paravertebral, because the right and left sympathetic trunk or sympathetic chain, it runs on side of the vertebral column. Okay, that you know. Okay, and in the ganglia of this trunk, there are the location of this postganglionic neuron. This is one group of the postganglionic neuron, but then these postganglionic neurons are also located on the another group called as another group which is called as prevertebral ganglion. So that was para, means on either side of the vertebral column, and this is prevertebral, that means in front of the vertebral bodies, and this is not in the form of the chain, but this is in the form of the isolated small collection of the neurons. Okay, so they are called as paravertebral ganglion, and these are three different types of the ganglion: the celiac ganglion, superior and inferior mesenteric ganglion, and they are all three are located in the abdominal cavity in front of the vertebral column. Okay, not on side but in front of the and in front of the vertebral column, what is running in abdomen? It is the aorta, the descending abdominal aorta, and they are located very close to the branches which are arising from the abdominal aorta, and this is celiac trunk is arising. Below that is superior mesenteric artery is arising, and still below that an inferior mesenteric artery is arising, and these ganglions are located, okay, in relation to this origin of these three different arteries in front of the abdominal aorta. Okay, so the two groups of the neurons are there. Okay, I'm say the postganglionic or postsynaptic neurons are organized in two different way where they are located. Okay, one is paravertebral in the sympathetic trunk, another is prevertebral, okay, in the celiac superior and inferior mesenteric ganglion. I am repeating it again so that you can understand. Now we move to the next slide where we will see their location, okay, in a diagram. Now see here, this is the sympathetic division by this. First see this cross section, okay? The spinal cord where these are the, I mean to say this is the location of the lateral horn. Just I will put my pointer here instead of this arrow. See this. This pointer is showing the lateral horn of the gray column or the, now this is the anterior horn, this is the posterior horn, and in between the two is lateral horn, which is present only from thoracic one spinal segmental level to that of the lumbar second spinal segmental level. Okay, so and in this lateral horn is present of the neurons, and these are motor neurons, small in size, much smaller as compared to the motor neurons which are present in the anterior gray horn, which were the somatic motor neurons supplying to the body, to the limbs, okay, to the skeletal muscles. Okay. So they were motor to the skeletal muscle. But this is motor to the viscera, okay, and they are small in size, preganglionic sympathetic neurons. Now this lateral horn, see the extent of this lateral horn in this side, in this diagram. This is the spinal cord, and they are extending, that means lateral horn is extending from T1 to the L2 segments of the spinal cord. Okay, now come to this diagram and see the green color lines here. These green color lines are just nothing but representing the axons. Okay, axons of what? Of the neurons which are located in the lateral horn. Okay, that is preganglionic sympathetic neuron, and these are the axons which are arising from the preganglionic sympathetic neuron. And we have learned that after their origin, just don't get confused. Here in this diagram I have drawn the axon of this preganglionic neuron in red color, and here it is in the green color. Okay, it is in the green color, so don't confuse please. Okay, so this preganglionic neuron axons, they will run into the ventral root of the spinal nerve, and then they will come to the ventral ramus, and then they will just jump to the this ganglion called a sympathetic ganglion. As here you see also in this diagram also, this green color preganglionic axons, they are running to the sympathetic chain where they will relay, okay, at that particular level. And from here the postganglionic fibers from these postganglionic neurons or postsynaptic neuron will arise, which is represented in this diagram by dotted line, and will supply to the target organ, to the viscera, to the gland, to the smooth muscles. Okay, so this is the postganglionic neuron. So this is relaying where? It is relaying in the paravertebral group of the neuron, postganglionic neurons, okay, or post, which is present in the sympathetic chain, that is called as paravertebral. Okay, paravertebral. This was the simplest explanation which I gave you in last lecture, but now come to a little more complication here. Okay, now this preganglionic fibers or axons which are arising from lateral horn from T1 to L2. What they may do, one thing they are doing is that they are relaying in the sympathetic chain at the same level. But then some of these fibers, they will ascend up in the sympathetic chain, okay, because sympathetic chain is extending right from the base of the skull to that of the sacrum, okay, the terminal end of sacrum, where they form the ganglion impar, okay. It is a long chain on right side and the left side. So these fibers, they will ascend up to many segments, okay, in the what this chain. Some may descend down as it is shown here. Some will descend down and will go into the terminal till the terminal end of the sympathetic chain. So this is second scenario. The first scenario was what? They are relying in the paravertebral ganglion or sympathetic chain at the same level, okay, from where? Between T1 and L2 segment. But then sympathetic chain is also extending above the T1 level in the neck region, and it is also extending below the L2 level, okay, up to the sacrum, up to the sacral region. Say for example, okay, I'm just trying to simplify it, okay. So they will have to descend also to relay at different levels. For example, here you can see this green color is relaying here at different ganglionic level of the sympathetic chain, and the postganglionic fibers are axon from these fibers. They are arising, which in this diagram are shown as the red color lines. So wherever you see the red color here in this diagram, these are the postganglionic fibers, and then they are going and supplying to the head and neck region, in the thoracic region where they supply the organs like heart and the lung, okay, right. This is the second scenario, okay. So they ascend and descend some levels, and then they relay in sympathetic chain, means in the paravertebral group, and then supply. Now we come to the third aspect of this, okay. Now some of these uh, preganglionic fibers, the green color fibers, they don't relay, okay, they don't relay. At every level there is relays taking place, but some, because there are hundreds and thousands of fiber at each segment of the spinal cord which are arising, out of which many of the fibers, okay, especially which are arising from the lower thoracic region, they are not relaying in the paravertebral group, okay, in the paravertebral or in sympathetic chain, but they just pass, okay, they just pass through it, and then they form a another kind of the nerve here. Still they are in green color, that means still they are preganglionic fibers, okay, so they are not relaying, and then they will come to the abdomen from thoracic region. They will come to the abdominal region, and in the form of the nerves which are called as splanchnic nerves. It is called as, so these are splank, this green color thing where my pointer is moving, they are splanchnic nerve. And where do they will relay then? They will relay in the celiac ganglion. This ganglion which is located here, it is the celiac ganglion. This is the superior mesenteric ganglion, and this is the inferior mesenteric ganglion. Just see my pointer where it is moving. Inferior mesenteric, this is the superior mesenteric, and this is the celiac. And I told you where these ganglion are present. These ganglion are present in front of the vertebral column, where the abdominal aorta is descending and which is giving branches, and they are associated with the origin of these branches from the abdominal aorta, okay. So they surround the, they form a plexus, this nerve, they form plexus here, and they collection of the neurons are there in the form of the ganglia, where these fibers they are relaying. So this is the third scenario, okay, of the sympathetic fibers, how do they will ultimately relay in the postsynaptic or post ganglionic neurons, right. Now then, After this relay, they will form the red lines here, and this is represented by, that means axons of the postsynaptic neuron, as I had told you for the thorax and the head and neck here. After relay in paravertebral ganglion or sympathetic chain ganglion, they will go and supply. In the similar way, from the celiac trunk, from superior mesenteric ganglion and inferior mesenteric, which are present in abdominal cavity, they will send their postsynaptic fibers or postganglionic fibers ultimately to the viscera of the abdominal cavity and to the pelvis. You can see here it is supplying to the stomach, supplying to the liver, supplying to the colon or the large intestine. Of course, definitely it will also supply to the small intestine. Then it is also supplying to the kidney, to the urinary bladder, and to the uterus and fallopian tubes. Okay. So all organs of the abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity are supplied by the sympathetic fibers. Okay. Now just note here, while these fibers are red in color, which are taking origin from this ganglion because they are axons of the now postganglionic fiber, but here you are seeing that one green color line is still, that means still it is preganglionic and it has not relayed in the celiac ganglion, but it has relayed here in the suprarenal gland, which is present onto the kidney. And why? Because it is said that the cells of suprarenal glands, okay, suprarenal medulla, I mean to say, okay, they are modified from the form of the postganglionic neurons. So they will go and supply here. I'm not going into the more detail because you will get confused. You have just got admission in the first year, okay? So just remember this point, why only one green line is shown in this diagram. So I hope I have explained you the three different scenarios or three different types of relay of these fibers, okay, into the postganglionic neuron or postsynaptic sympathetic neuron. Sympathetic. And what is the target organ? Beside this viscera, it is the smooth muscle which is present in this organ, the glands which may be endocrine, or the glands present into the gastrointestinal tract, and the cardiac muscle of the heart. Okay, these are the target organ where this sympathetic division is going. Beside it is going to the skin and the blood vessels. Okay, they are supplying the blood vessels, that means the smooth muscle of tunica media of the blood vessel, and to the various glands present in skin, say for example sebaceous gland, okay, or I mean say sweat glands, okay, and erector pili muscle, which is a smooth muscle present into the skin. Okay, so this is supplying to the skin. Okay, don't confuse that it will supply to the I mean say somatic type of fiber pen touch, and it is not. Okay, it is not, please. Okay, don't. Okay, I know that it is difficult, but you have to learn it. Okay, now I go to the next diagram, which is probably the will deal again the similar kind of thing. Okay, now most of the thing I have already explained to you about the sympathetic, but I will just go through this. What is its right up here? The axons of preganglionic neurons leave the spinal cord through ventral root and enters the ventral rami of the spinal nerve. That I have told you in great detail during the formation of a typical spinal nerve and in last lecture where I was showing the general aspect of the autonomic nervous system. Now this myelinated fiber, because they are myelinated, preganglionic. See in this diagram, all these green color thing which are axons of the preganglionic neurons, they are myelinated fibers, and that's why they look white. Hence they are called as white rami communicantes when they join from ventral rami to the sympathetic ganglion, okay, to the sympathetic chain. This is white that I have already shown you yesterday. Okay, I mean to say in my last video. And then they enter the sympathetic trunk to form a synaptic contact with the postganglionic neurons. Now there may be three conditions which I have already described. When they are approaching the sympathetic chain, these fibers, they will synapse the postsynaptic neuron at the same level. That was the first scenario. Second scenario is that they will ascend or descend to some level. For example, here see the T1 and T2 fibers, they are ascending, okay, here, and in the lower part from lower limb, I would say L1, L2 or T12, they will descend down. Okay, I will remove my photograph if it is interfering. They will descend down here. See this, when they will form the synaptic contact into the inferior mesenteric ganglion, from which the postsynaptic fiber will supply to the viscera of the pelvic cavity and to the lower abdomen. Okay, lower. So this was second scenario, which was ascending and descending for few levels. The third scenario, okay, they may pass through the sympathetic trunk without relay and form the splanchnic nerve, okay, which are formed in the thoracic cavity, and then it penetrates the diaphragm and comes to the abdominal cavity, where three ganglions are located in front of the vertebra. Okay, that's why they are called as the prevertebral ganglion, and they synapse here with this superior, I mean say celiac trunk here in this diagram, in superior mesenteric ganglion and inferior. So celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric ganglion and inferior mesenteric, where, and then the postsynaptic fibers will arise. Okay, we have discussed it already. Okay, coming to the next slide. Let us see here the sympathetic division again. Okay, the postsynaptic fibers, neurons are and their axon. Okay, now we just trace the postsynaptic, which here are represented in red color. Okay, send their axon to the ventral rami, which are unmyelinated. So all these red fibers, which will join again to the ventral ramus, okay, from sympathetic chain, they are unmyelinated, and that's why they are called as gray rami communicantes. Okay, so from ventral rami they are distributed through spinal nerve branches, and then they will be distributed along with the spinal ventral ramus and dorsal ramus of the typical spinal nerve, which we have learned in the formation of a spinal. They will run along with those fibers, okay, in the ventral ramus and the dorsal ramus of the spinal nerve. Okay, along with that the fibers will go to the different places, okay, to the different places. Now these postganglionic or postsynaptic fibers from sympathetic trunk supply, what do they supply? Some of them I have already told you. They will supply the blood vessel to the sweat gland, to the smooth muscles of the hair follicle, which I said in the last slide, they are called erector pili. And then this supply the parts of the head and neck. See, this is where my pointer, the parts of the head and neck and the thoracic viscera, means lung and the heart, but the postsynaptic fibers from prevertebral ganglia, hmm, uh, they will supply the abdominal and pelvic viscera. This we have already learned from celiac trunk and, I mean say, celiac ganglion, superior and inferior mesenteric, the postsynaptic fibers they will supply here. Okay, now I am moving to the next slide, and see, now we have completed the first component of the autonomic nervous system, our first part, our first division of the autonomic nervous system, which was called as the sympathetic division of the auto. Now we come to the second division, and the second division is the parasympathetic. Okay, it is parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. Now, this division is also known as craniosacral outflow. Craniosacral, there are two parts, cranium and sacral. Okay, cranial sacral. Why it is called as craniosacral outflow? Because the presynaptic neurons or the preganglionic neurons, they are situated in brain. That's why it is called as cranio, because brain is located in cranial cavity or skull, cranium. And then the presynaptic group of a neuron is also then located in the lowermost part of the spinal cord, which is the sacral segment of the spinal cord. Okay, this is called as the sacral segment of the spinal cord. So that's why it is called as, see here, now I will show you where is cranial. See this is the brain stem, and in some of the nuclei of the cranial nerve which takes origin from brainstem, that is from midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata, that is known as brainstem. You will soon learn about this division. Okay, now these fibers, preganglionic fibers, they arise from along with these fibers of the cranial nerves. Okay, so this is the cranial outflow. And which are these cranial nerves? As I told you, there are the 12 cranial nerves, okay, with 12 on right side and 12 which takes origin from our brain, okay. That's why they are called as cranial nerve. And these cranial nerve are cranial nerve number 3rd, that is oculomotor, cranial nerve number 7, that is facial, cranial nerve number 9, that is the glossopharyngeal, and cranial nerve number 10, that is the vagus nerve. So these are the nerves which are shown here in the green color because it is the preganglionic fibers are here, which are the axons of these neurons, okay, and they form the preganglionic fibers, and they come out along with this cranial nerve from various foramina of the skull, okay, and they supply the distant places, mostly head and neck region. But the vagus nerve will supply also to the abdominal viscera, okay, upper abdomen. Let us come to the second outflow, okay, that is the sacral. See this pointer in the diagram, and this is the terminal end of the spinal cord is here, and these neurons are situated in the lateral gray column, just similar to the T1 to L1 there was for sympathetic preganglionic neuron, there was a lateral column. In the similar way, here is the lateral column is also present from S2 to the S4 spinal segment. Okay, S2 means sacral 2 and S4 matlab sacral 4. Okay, now these fibers which comes out through this ventral rami, they travel in pelvic splank, those which comes out from these three segments. Let me remove my photograph. Now this fibers which they come out from S1, S2, S3, S4, they are the preganglionic fibers. They are preganglionic and they come through the ventral rami and travel to the pelvic splanchnic nerve. Okay, they form the pelvic splanchnic nerve. There was the thoracic splanchnic nerve, here it is the pelvic splanchnic nerve, are these, and they are approaching, see here in upper part as well as in lower part, that is in the cranial outflow and sacral outflow. All these green color fibers, they are preganglionic and they are going very close to the organ to which they are supplying, okay, to the organ to which they are supplying. Now I will move to the next slide where we will learn about the postganglionic fibers of the parasympathetic. The two outflow you have understood, cranial outflow and sacral outflow. Right, this is parasympathetic again, division of, and preganglionic axons are long. See here, now the color code has changed here. Just see here, the color code is the red. Okay, preganglionic, they are in red color here. See this red color, and this is the cranial outflow, that is cross section passing through the brain stem where the 10th cranial nerve vagus is. There are many, I told you 4 different, 3rd, 7th, 9th and 10th cranial nerve, and this is section passing through the 10th cranial nerve, okay, which is the vagus nerve. And you are seeing here is the location of the preganglionic neuron, which is located in the central nervous system, and the the preganglionic axon or axon of this neuron, okay, there will be thousands, okay, just only one is shown here. This is a long axon. After coming from the cranial cavity, it is still running forward, okay, and it is ending into a ganglia which is very close to the viscera, that is hard, just very close to viscera. And this ganglia is not given any specific name, but because there are multiple, okay, they are multiple ganglia and they are located very close to viscera. This is just opposite to that of the sympathetic, where the postganglionic neurons were located where, either in sympathetic chain or into celiac ganglia, or superior mesenteric, or inferior mesenteric ganglia. Now these are known as terminal ganglia, and which are having neurons, collection of neurons called as the postsynaptic neurons, or this is the postganglionic neurons, and their axon is represented here in red line but with the dotted line, and then they are going and supplying, okay, they are going and supplying to the viscera. Now, close to the organ, as I said, there is a terminal ganglia which contain postsynaptic neuron. Okay, in the last lecture, I told you the general aspect of autonomic nervous system, and I said that the motor pathway of an autonomic nervous system, whether it is sympathetic or parasympathetic, it will contain two sets of the neurons. Okay, preganglionic and postganglionic. Now the axon of these postsynaptic neurons, they are very short, but the axons of the preganglionic neurons are very long. This is somewhat reverse in case of the sympathetic, okay, because their ganglia was located very close to midline, either in front of the vertebral column or by the side of the, and then from there the postganglionic fibers were distributing for a long distance. That means they were running for long distance to go to their target organ. Okay, target. It is just reverse. Here the preganglion itself is coming close to the organ. Okay, there it was not the preganglionic which was coming, except in case of the suprarenal gland. Okay, only one place was there. Otherwise here everywhere they are coming right up to the organ to which they have to supply. Now this I mean to say postganglionic fibers, they supply smooth muscle and glands in the wall of the organ. Similar, okay, just like similar to sympathetic. Now the terminal ganglia of the cranial outflow, that means which are coming from the, along with the cranial nerves, okay, coming out of the brain stem. The terminal ganglia of the cranial outflow or ciliary ganglia, the ciliary ganglia is associated with the third cranial nerve, okay, third cranial. Pterygopalatine ganglia, which is associated with the seventh cranial nerve. Otic ganglia, which is associated with the 11th cranial nerve, and the submandibular, which is again associated with the seventh cranial nerves. They are there, but they are very close to the organ, okay. Many terminal ganglia for vagus are in thorax and abdomen, very close to the organ within the thoracic cavity and where the organ is situated, or in the abdominal cavity. Now the postganglionic fibers of sacral outflow, these were the postganglionic fibers of the I mean to say from cranial outflow. Now we are talking of the postganglionic fibers of the sacral outflow, which is coming from terminal end of the spinal cord. Now see these fibers, this is the from spinal cord, okay. So this is either S2, S3 or S4 segment of the spinal cord, and these fibers are coming, and then this is from terminal ganglia, this fibers is going to the viscera, say here is colon, descending colon, okay, and it contained the smooth muscle, so they are going and supplying to the smooth muscle and the glands of this organs. So that means in colon there are a lot of the mucus secreting gland, there may be some on the bottom of the intestinal gland, okay, there may be the endocrine cells also. All these are, that means these fiber, postganglionic fiber from sacral outflow, which is going to the pelvic organs and the lower abdominal organs, they supply the smooth muscle and to the gland. I hope that you have understood the two different divisions of sympathetic and parasympathetic. As I said that you are quite new, okay, recently came to the medical colleges, so there may be a lot of confusion, but when you will read from your books, okay, general anatomy books, many of these things will clear, okay, will be clear to you, right? Moving to the next slide, and this slide, well, this is the last slide of the lecture, which is showing you the organs which are innervated by the parasympathetic division. and we have mostly covered these organs. Those from the third, seventh, ninth, and the 10th cranial nerves are shown here. The cranial nerve third, the oculomotor, then the facial, they supply the most of the glands of the, which are present into the head and neck region. Say for example, it is supplying to the lacrimal gland, then this division will also supply to the smooth muscle of the iris, that is which regulates the contraction and relaxation of the sphincter of pupillae, and then this will also supply to the glands like submandibular gland, and then this is a, ninth cranial nerve which will supply to the parotid gland. Okay, the part of the seventh cranial nerve will supply to the submandibular gland also. Okay, submandibular, and these are the ganglia which are associated with these cranial nerves, parasympathetic cranial nerves. The third cranial nerve was attic ganglia. Here was the submandibular or maxillary ganglia, and then associated with the maxillary nerve, okay, pterygopalatine, and then there is the ganglia which is associated with the parotid gland, okay, of the 11th cranial nerve. Sorry, it is the ninth cranial nerve, glossopharyngeal, is that is the attic ganglia. Okay, now this is the vagus nerve. Okay, and this vagus nerve has a large distribution into the thoracic organ as well as of the organs which are located into the abdominal cavity. Okay, upper abdomen, mostly upper abdomen, because the lower abdomen are supplied by, and pelvic organ are supplied by the pelvic outflow or sacral outflow through the pelvic splanchnic nerve, sacral outflow. So this completes the lecture on the sympathetic and parasympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. To understand this lecture on sympathetic and parasympathetic of the autonomic nervous system, you have to also study the previous lecture, okay, which deals with the general aspect of the autonomic nervous system. Thank you very much.